So I invite you to take the message notes out of your bulletin. You can take notes during the message or remind yourself of anything that God is speaking to you today. And I would like to start off by saying our verse for this month. It's at the bottom of the page. If you have it memorized, say it without reading. If not, I have your cheat sheet for you right here. So it's Mark 10:27. Let's say this together. Jesus looked at them and said, "For mortals it is impossible, but not for God. For God all things are possible." I always feel kind of sad at the end of a series, because it seems like it's always tough to end something and move on. But let me remind you where we've been in this series. We talked about at the beginning of Mark 10, Jesus was talking about divorce and reconciliation. So what are things that separate us and tear us apart and also bring us back to God? And it's always Jesus Christ that brings us back to God. And then we looked at, where's your heart with the rich man? What is holding us back from seeing the grace of God? And we looked at last week about being great. What is true greatness? It's not someone that has a public platform all the time, but it's someone that really exemplifies a servant's heart in their day-to-day life. And today we're going to look at blindness and gaining sight. Next Sunday is All Saints Sunday. Remember that we are going to honor those who have gone on to their forever home, the kingdom eternal, that have shaped us in some way in our faith life or in our life. This will be a time in the service where we'll honor them by lighting candles and just praising God for them that we've gotten to, that we had part of their life. And our theme throughout November is giving thanks. And then we move into Advent, where we look and wait with expectation to see the coming of the Christ child. So here now, our scripture today from Mark 10, verse 46 to 52. And as I read it, I want you to think about where you would be in this story. They, the disciples and Jesus, came to Jericho. As he and his disciples and a large crowd were leaving Jericho, Bartimaeus, son of Timaeus, a blind beggar, was sitting by the roadside. When he heard that it was Jesus of Nazareth, he began to shout out and say, "Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me." Many sternly ordered him to be quiet, but he cried out even more loudly, "Son of David, have mercy on me." Jesus stood still and said, "Call him here." And they called the blind man, saying to him, "Take heart, get up, he is calling you." So throwing off his cloak, he sprang up and came to Jesus. Then Jesus said to him, "What do you want me to do for you?" The blind man said to him, "My teacher, let me see again." Jesus said to him, "Go, your faith has made you well." Immediately he regained his sight and followed him along the way. So may God add a blessing to the reading, hearing, and understanding of the scripture today. So there's several things that we can see in this passage. The first thing that I think is really interesting is about Bartimaeus and his determination. It shows us that we should stay determined whenever we're trying to encounter Christ in our daily lives. So what was happening, or what's going to happen next? This is right before Jesus is going to enter the darkest time in his public human life, and he gives someone the gift of sight. He gives someone the opportunity to see light right before Jesus goes into a dark place, which actually gives us hope and light and grace in our lives. There's a beggar. He was blind and he was shouting. He was persistent. He was saying, "Son of David, have mercy on me. Come over here. I need you." We hear people like that all the time. We may not realize it. Could be people that are going through such difficult times that they may not be crying out verbally, but they're crying on the inside. We don't ever look at the appearance. We look at seeing what God can do and will do in the midst of hard times. Was he blind from birth, or did something happen? We don't know. It just says that we know he wasn't blind from birth, probably because he regained his sight. He got his vision back. We don't know how long he was blind. But that's not the point of the story. The point of the story is that someone was in darkness, or they couldn't see all of the light, whatever it might be. And Christ comes in and shows them light. And he does the same for us today. And there's this crowd. The crowd is stopping and they're hushing this person trying to get close to Christ. Who was in the crowd? The disciples were part of that crowd. How many people have we seen or experienced or come across our path that feel like there are people keeping them away from encountering God? But God still comes to them. One of the challenges is to not just pay attention to what people are saying or how they're acting, but look to their real need. This person's real need was to see, and he was seeking Christ, the healer. People's real need in life, whether they're going to say it out loud or not, is to experience and know the living God who created them. And when they have an opportunity to encounter Christ, there will be people that try to keep them down, saying, no, you're looking at the wrong answers. Go only towards science. There's also people that are going to say, don't go towards science, only look at faith. Your faith will heal you. And there's people that still try to come on both sides that try to keep people away from Christ, whether we realize it or not. But he was determined, and he stayed the course with what he was going to do. He was determined to get his sight back. And Jesus, through all the midst of the shouting of the beggar, he's saying, Son of David, have mercy on me. And the crowd is saying, shh, be quiet, don't say anything, don't bother him. Jesus stops. He stands still. He doesn't move. He sees what's happening. He sees there's someone with a real need. He stops. And he says, bring him to me. And then what happens? Some of the disciples, some of the people say, look, the teacher is calling you. He's so excited. He throws off his clothes and runs up to Jesus. I would probably run the other way if a naked person chased after me like that. But Jesus stood still. And he did not prevent him from coming to him. And then he asked the same question he asked that we talked about last week with James and John. What do you want me to do for you? The blind beggar says, I want to see again. Contrasting that with last week, James and John said, I want glory. I want to be recognized. Didn't see what God was really doing in that moment. And the beggar says, I want to see. And so he says, you're healed. There's different ways that Jesus healed blindness in the Bible. Some of the ways he just spit on someone. Nowadays we take that as an insult. Don't go up to anyone and go and spit on them and say, you're healed. They won't really like that. Trust me. Other times he spit on the ground and he mixed it up and he put mud on their eyes. Other times like this, he just said, you're healed. It doesn't matter how Jesus heals. The point is that Jesus heals. He brings light into darkness. Brings us all the way back to Genesis 1 in a lot of ways. The earth was formless and void and dark. Say it with me. God said, let there be light. Light shines in the darkness, and God brings light in our darkest points in our life, whether it's our physical sight or darkness in life that we're going through. Whether it's situations or circumstances, there are things that prevent us from seeing light. There are several things that happened this past week that could have prevented me from seeing the grace of God, but I am so thankful that God placed the people in my path that I was able to not take my eyes off Christ. It came about Tuesday night after I was sitting with the Bradburys all afternoon thinking, what am I doing? And Wednesday morning, I go to the nursing home and visit, and I talked with this lady, and she didn't hear me say I was a pastor, and I prayed with her. She looked at me and smiled and said, you're a pastor, aren't you? It's these little things that can help us see the grace of God and help us see light in the darkest parts of life. This man was physically blind. We often talk about blindness as something physical, as something just with our eyes, but there's several other types of blindness that we may not always talk about. There's mental blindness, there's emotional blindness, there's spiritual blindness. So I did some research this week. I thought I was smart, and I wrote down emotional, mental, and spiritual blindness. So I decided to look it up, and there's actually something about it. There's definitions for it. Emotional blindness is this. These are just some of them. Difficulty in identifying different feelings, or difficulty expressing feelings. Difficulty recognizing facial cues in others. There could be hypersensitive to physical situations. They can have a detached or a tentative connection with others. When we close ourselves off emotionally, we're going to feel like we're walking in a place of darkness, and we're not going to want to be around other people. But God still shows His love through other people. Mental blindness. It says cognitive disorder where an individual is unable to attribute mental states to the self and others. People with this are usually unaware of others' mental states, so we're not really paying attention to what people are thinking or understanding why people think a certain way. And there's spiritual blindness. We know that spiritual blindness is someone who for whatever reason stays trapped within themselves and doesn't allow themselves to see the light that's shining through God's grace. We all have been in a place of physical blindness, even if it's at night and we just can't see, of mental blindness, of emotional blindness, and of spiritual blindness. But Jesus stands still. He says, what do you want me to do for you? And our hearts cry out, have mercy on me. I want to see. Life is bringing me down. I want to see this light. I want to see hope. I want to see you in the midst of this tragedy. Because right now I can't see past it. And Jesus says, go. You are healed. You can see. Sometimes it may happen instantaneously. Sometimes it may take a little bit of time. But when Christ comes in, we can see. And I love what Bartimaeus is doing. He's saying, have mercy on me. He doesn't stop saying that. Jesus hears him. So Bartimaeus cries out to Christ. Christ responds. And when Christ responds, Bartimaeus can see. When we cry out to Christ, Christ stops, He listens, He responds. When Christ responds to our cry, we are changed. And we get to go because we can see the light of Jesus Christ wherever we are. we can't let people hold us back. We can't be people that hold others back. Because it's Christ that's bringing light into the darkness. He's helping people see. He's helping people experience new life and new grace. And they're changed. See, Christ comes in to open all pathways to sight. Could be our eyes, could be mentally, emotionally, spiritually, whatever it is, relationally. He's opened all pathways so that light can shine in the darkness. And then we look at this passage and we say, who really was more blind? The physically blind man or the crowd and the disciples? I think Jesus heals both categories in this moment. So whether we've been to church all our life, whether this is our first Sunday, whether we just experience God just in an instant one day, Christ comes in. We could be the people that are like, yes, I got this down. I know Christ is with me, but there can be a new revelation where he says, I want you to see more. I'm healing you. Whatever that looks like. And then there's people that have been walking without knowing Christ. He says, here I am. Here's hope. Here's a way. Here's the truth about you. And here is life. And we get to be the instruments that carry this to the world wherever we are. To all people. To help them see and experience God's grace. What a gift that is. When we can't do it, or we realize we can't, we say, have mercy. I need you, Christ. I need you, Jesus. And he says, here I am. What do you want me to do for you? What is your answer? Is it, I want to see? Or just help me get through this situation? There's two differences. Seeing helps us see past this situation in grace. Christ is here. You are healed. You are a new creation because of Jesus Christ. Once was lost, but now we're found. Was blind, but now we see. This is a time to respond. And I'll let you respond, or you're invited to come up here to the altar area. You can touch the water to remind yourself that it's new life. It's refreshing through your soul. You can pray, you can confess, whatever it might be. But Jesus is saying, what do you want me to do for you? Let's take just a little bit of time and respond. Dear Jesus, here we are. Hear our prayer. And let there be light. Amen.